Hello guys, gals, and also the gamers. Don't forget the gamers, they also watch my videos. Anyways, before we begin, I would love to remind you guys to please like and subscribe. If we hit 500 subscribers by the end of the year, I will do a very special live stream dissecting the game design behind the most disappointing game I have ever played. Also, leave a comment down below because I really want to start a discussion with my video, especially because today's topic is like really interesting. Today, I want to talk to you guys about game design philosophy, and we're going to talk about big three companies: Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. You know, the big console maker guys, and how they basically do game design philosophy. What game design philosophy basically means is how you approach making games. And I find this topic like really interesting and still useful because I do not see a lot of people just talk about it. A lot of like how do you make video games is just theory, not think about these things for yourself. I feel like a lot of it is just based on technical aspects like how do game engines work and how do you learn them. And if you want to do that, I would recommend learning Unreal Engine 4 or 5 or Unity maybe. And then for coding language, C++ is a really good one. All these three companies that I'm going to be talking about today, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, all use C++. So yeah, that's all for the technical things. And a lot of the talk is also about what is the process of making video games. Like first you plan it, then it's pre-production, production, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. But what kind of ideals do you have when it comes to video games? What do video games mean to you? Are they just another form of media? Are they entertainment? Are they something much more? That is what I want to talk about. And how do these three companies view gaming as? Of course, it is good to know that all of these are, big companies, and their main thing is to make money, of course. So they're not like deeply philosophical, and it's not something like super hard to think about. And also, a lot of these companies have like a lot of studios who might have like different values to the main company and might be focused on something else. Like, for example, Monolith Soft, a subsidiary of Nintendo or a studio of Nintendo, focuses more on RPGs and focuses a bit more on story and characters than Nintendo usually does. So it is good to keep that in mind, that when I talk about a overall philosophy in a company, I do not necessarily mean that all aspects of that company follow the exact same sets of value. So that is good to remember. But now let's get started. And I want to talk about Sony and PlayStation first. Basically, what Sony sees gaming as is entertainment. And that really makes sense when you look at their products. There's a lot of cinematic influence, I feel like, in Sony games. And there's a lot like focus on narrative more than just basically the gameplay. And often the games, I feel like, structured around these cool action set pieces that really make you feel powerful because of what you see on screen and the actions that the characters make. And that is a completely valid way of making games. And what makes this even better is the Sony's kind of focus on making stuff look really cool and really awesome. A lot of this is just making the game look very realistic and lifelike, like they do with games like Last of Us or Horizon. When you look at the robot dinosaurs in Horizon, you look at them as if they could be real. But this goes even further to they like cartoony games like Ratchet and Clank and maybe Astro's Playroom or whatever the other Astro game was called. But even those, they look very cinematic as well. It's almost uncanny how much like the latest Ratchet and Clank looks like a well-animated Pixar movie. Also, for PlayStation, I think this like cinematic influence basically started with the PS3 era, with games like The Last of Us and Uncharted being like really huge successes. So I think that's where they kind of got like, hey, these games are really successful, we should make more of these. But kind of the flaw in PlayStation's design philosophy is kind of that they, in my opinion, they are a bit too careful sometimes, and they rely on stuff that they know already works, which is always a good thing. But you can see this very much in kind of the variety of games that they put out. Basically, all of the big blockbuster games that Sony releases, they are mostly all in like the same genre. They are all like action adventure, very narrative focused adventures, which is, it is fine. It is completely fine, but yeah, there is not a lot of variety. And a lot of this stuff is also very Western. A lot of the Sony studios are now located in America or Europe instead of having a lot of studios in Japan, despite Sony being originally a Japanese company. And a lot of people don't like Sony games. Well, there are some people who don't like it. I'm not saying there's a huge majority of people who don't like them. And I kind of understand why. I see Sony games that, or the games that Sony puts out under like PlayStation Studios or whatever, I kind of see a good comparison to like Marvel movies in the MCU if you follow films in any way. Probably do in some way. We are all nerds watching this. I know. But Marvel movies themselves are really great. They are good audience pleasing moments. But if you look at like a film critic really criticizing the aspects of the film, there's not really anything like too groundbreaking. A lot of them start to feel the same, kind of follow this formula in a way. And if you want something like groundbreaking and innovative, you might not find that in Sony games or Marvel movies. So I think that is a good comparison. Feel free to disagree with me, comment down below, good for the algorithm, but that is just how I feel. Overall, I do think Sony has a good philosophy when it comes to making games, and the games they make can be like really awesome. Next up is Nintendo and their Nintendo consoles, basically, yeah. Nintendo is a bit different from Sony. They see games as fun. That is the main word Nintendo uses. They're just fun. They're basically kind of like a toy company, which they also are, but they just want you to have a lot of fun with the games. They are less focused on like the narrative stuff or the power of their console or looking that good. The focus is mainly on the moment-to-moment gameplay. It needs to be fun. If you're not having fun just playing Kirby, you might not care about the story at all. What matters most is just fun. Something a lot of the big franchises Nintendo has, like Kirby or Mario, they're not really focused on the lore or the characters or the story at all. They're just fun to play, and that's what Nintendo really wants to do. With Nintendo, they also do a lot of variety, a lot of risks too, sometimes. There is a lot of different genres that Nintendo puts out because a lot of the stuff on Nintendo consoles, what sells the consoles, are the Nintendo games, so this makes sense. They do racing games, they do RPGs, they do platformers, they do simulation games, they make games about making games, they do a lot of different stuff. And they are very innovative, but the taking risks thing is something of a double-edged sword sometimes, because sometimes you have successes like the Wii console, but sometimes, well, it follows up with the Wii U, which was another gimmicky console that just didn't land with a mainstream audience or even the gaming audience for that matter. So sometimes they get their innovations correctly and do something really great that a lot of people get a bit jealous of and try to copy maybe sometimes. But a lot of the time what they try to do don't really plan out as, as they wished. And I feel like for Nintendo, kind of this idea of games being something fun for everyone. Kind of runs in their whole company DNA, because they started out as like a playing card company, and then they moved on to a lot of different business ventures, somehow settling on toys, and there advanced to video games. So they have that childlike mindset in their DNA basically, and trying out different things. So it makes sense for them, and they have been doing a really good job. So why change that? Also, an interesting thing about Nintendo's philosophy is that while they take a lot of risks, they like to do things differently, and they are kind of conservative when it comes to following trends, including like social ones. They don't hop on to like the battle royale train as soon as possible. They don't do DLC as quickly as you could. They don't embrace mobile from day one. They kind of just observe and see where things go. And with social things, a lot of other games would just, highlight the fact that there is diversity in their games, while Nintendo, while they include that stuff sometimes, they don't really make a big deal about it, and sometimes just don't like even bother mentioning it. Something like clearly queer coded characters in something like Breath of the Wild, or how they approach gender in Splatoon or Animal Crossing, they just don't mention it. But at the same time, Nintendo barely mentions anything to do with relationships or gender stuff altogether, I feel like. Like, when was the last time Nintendo officially was like, okay, Zelda and Link, they are together, or Mario and Peach? While they are implied, it's just not a thing that Nintendo really mentions. And I just feel that aspect kind of interesting, because they just want to stay in the middle, and if they include stuff, they just, include stuff and they don't make a big deal about it. It helps kind of normalize the stuff, but at the same time, you're not celebrating it. So it's just an interesting perspective, and I wanted to mention it here. I'm definitely not the person to talk about this stuff, but I just find it interesting with how they design things and what is their philosophy when it comes to these things, because it is very different from the other players in the industry, including the two other companies that I'm going to be I have been talking about today. But yeah, let's move on to the last company that I will be covering here, and Microsoft and Xbox. And this one is a bit difficult, because Microsoft, I do not know what they have seen games as for the most of their life. I know the current situation, I'm going to explain it in a moment, but before that, I want to tell you a cool story that I know of the early days of Xbox, when I feel like they were a bit struggling with their identity. And this is before the Xbox even launched. And Xbox was looking to make a somewhat of a big thing in Japan. They needed the help of Japanese developers, because they were very prevalent in the field at the time. Still are, but even more. And they, of course, wanted some of that Japanese audience, but that would be a very hard thing, because your main two competitors are Sony and Nintendo. Even Sega is all Japanese. So you kind of wanted to have discussions with Japanese developers and try to get them to put their games on Xbox. And they actually had a really good opportunity to have a really big Japanese game exclusive on the Xbox platform. And that game was Resident Evil 4. That didn't, of course, happen, because they had an interview or a discussion with the main creative guy behind the Resident Evil franchise. I do not remember the full name, Shinji something. And they had a discussion with it. Shinji arriving there wearing like a leather jacket and sunglasses, because, he's rock star. But then the interview they completely botched it, because the translator in the room just couldn't answer any of the questions that Shinji asked. And one of the questions that he asked was actually about game design philosophy or gaming philosophy. How do they approach gaming? Because Sony sees games as entertainment, Nintendo sees games as fun. What do you guys bring to the table? What do you see games as? and the guy couldn't answer. Shinji just got mad and left. And later on, the translator was explained like, okay, Xbox sees games as something that can be artistic. And that, for me, it just feels very weird. While I agree that games can be art, and they definitely are, in the same way as music, books, movies, or other forms of medium can be. Games definitely can be art, but it's not a thing I think about when I play the first Halo game, when I play games from the Xbox era. It's just not a thing that comes to my mind, and I do not think the games back then were made to be very artistic. It's just a very weird answer. But nowadays, they luckily have a much better understanding of who they want to be. And with Xbox, there is still kind of a problem because the Xbox studios are so kind of fractured, especially because they have made a lot of acquisitions recently, like past 10 years. So the situation is still evolving, let's say. And they have absorbed some big companies like Bethesda and maybe Activision Blizzard in the future as well. So it's not a unifying concept. But the main Xbox team basically thinks games as something for everyone. They do not see as games as individual products. They want to offer games as kind of this service, and that's exactly what they are doing. They offer Game Pass service, which is a subscription service that allows more access for a lot more games for a lot more people, because it's not a $70 purchase that you have to do in order to get one game. It is like $10 a month that you can access a variety of games. It is much easier to be a fan of all gaming if you own an Xbox. But that is not all, because Xbox also thinks about accessibility and gaming being for everyone with the platforms they offer gaming on. Because not only is there Xbox, there's also PC. Well, if you have Windows, I have a Mac, so yeah, not me. But they also have invested a lot in cloud gaming. So you could, if you have good enough internet, play some cool AAA games on your phone or tablet or whatever mobile device you use. So that is also very interesting. They also have accessibility features in their consoles and games. A lot of the hiring things I have seen, they have a lot of programs for like women and different minorities to success more in the landscape of gaming and the gaming industry. They do accessibility controllers that work in more than just Xbox, which is really cool. So the gaming is being something for everyone is kind of their main philosophy now. So I think that was an interesting look about gaming philosophies and game design philosophies when it comes to like these big companies. What is your philosophy when it comes to playing or making games? Let me know down in the description. Do you disagree with something here on this video? Let me know. I would be very interested in talking about it with you. But I have nothing else to add here, so I will just see you guys next time. Bye bye.